The moment Eliza Morgan asked me to be her fake husband, I knew my life would never be the same. What I didn't expect was how her 6-year-old daughter would look at me with hope in her eyes, or how my own son would finally start smiling again. If you've ever wondered if pretending can lead to something real, stay with me until the end. This story might just change the way you see love, family, and second chances. If you're enjoying this journey of unexpected love and family, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more stories that touch your heart. Your support means everything. ## Chapter 1, The Proposition. The first time I saw Eliza Morgan cry was also the day she asked me to marry her. Not for real, of course. Nothing in my life had ever been that simple. I was working late at Morgan Enterprises, hunched over spreadsheets that refused to balance, when the door to my office swung open without a knock. Only one person in the entire building would enter that way. "James, I need you to," Eliza stopped mid-sentence, her normally commanding voice faltering. I looked up from my computer, surprised to see my boss, the CEO of Morgan Enterprises and one of Boston's most formidable businesswomen, standing in my doorway with red-rimmed eyes and smudged mascara. "Ms. Morgan?" I stood up immediately. In the 3 years I'd worked as her financial director, I'd seen her angry, determined, victorious, and occasionally amused. But never vulnerable. Never broken. "Close the door," she said, her voice steadier now but still lacking its usual edge. I did as instructed, then watched as she paced the length of my office, her designer heels clicking against the hardwood floor. Her dark hair was pulled back in its usual perfect bun, but a few strands had escaped, framing a face that looked unusually pale beneath her makeup. "I need to ask you something," she said finally, stopping to face me. "Something completely inappropriate and probably illegal." I raised an eyebrow. Should I be recording this conversation for my future legal defense? The joke fell flat. Eliza didn't even crack a smile. "My grandmother is dying," she said bluntly. "I'm sorry to hear that," I replied, genuinely concerned. Eliza rarely mentioned her family, but I knew her grandmother had raised her after her parents died. "She has 3 months, maybe less." Eliza's voice was clinical, as if discussing a business forecast rather than a family tragedy. "And she has one final wish." "Which is?" "To see me married before she dies." Eliza's laugh was hollow. "Apparently, her greatest regret is that I've dedicated my life to the company instead of finding love and starting a family." I shifted uncomfortably. "I'm not sure how I can help with that." "Aren't you?" Her eyes locked with mine, sharp and calculating even through her distress. "James, you're divorced, responsible, presentable. You understand business. My grandmother has never met you." The implication hung in the air between us. "You want me to pretend to be your husband?" I asked incredulously. "For 1 year," she clarified. "Just until she passes and the will is settled." "The will?" I repeated, understanding dawning. "This is about inheritance." Eliza sighed, dropping into the chair across from my desk. For the first time since I'd known her, she looked defeated. "My grandmother owns 40% of Morgan Enterprises. If she dies believing I'm still the workaholic single woman she worries about, she'll put those shares in a trust with conditions. Conditions that would effectively give my cousin Philip control until I settle down properly." The air quotes were audible in her tone. "And Philip would run the company into the ground," I finished for her. I'd met her cousin at corporate events, a charming, irresponsible playboy with expensive tastes and no business sense. Within a year, Eliza confirmed grimly. 500 employees would lose their jobs. Everything my parents built, everything I've dedicated my life to, gone. I ran a hand through my hair, trying to process what she was asking. "This is insane. There has to be another way. I've explored every option, James. This is it." She leaned forward, her expression intense. I'm not asking you to do this for free. Name your price. It's not about money, I protested. Then what is it about? Principles? Morality? Her voice took on a familiar edge. This was the Eliza Morgan I knew, the woman who closed million-dollar deals through sheer force of will. Everyone has a price, James. What's yours? I thought about my son, Ethan. About the small apartment we shared since the divorce. About the private school tuition I could barely afford, and the college fund that remained stubbornly empty despite my long hours at the office. If I were to consider this, and I'm not saying I am, it wouldn't be simple, I said slowly. I have Ethan to think about. Something in Eliza's expression softened at the mention of my 8-year-old son. Of course. He'd be part of the arrangement. We'd need to look like a real family. A real family, I repeated, the words feeling strange on my tongue. It had been 2 years since my ex-wife left us for her yoga instructor and moved to California. 2 years of me trying to be both mother and father to a boy who barely spoke anymore. I have a daughter, Eliza said quietly. I stared at her in shock. In 3 years of working closely with her, she'd never once mentioned a child. Lily is 6, she continued, looking away. She lives with my grandmother in the family estate outside the city. I see her on weekends. The revelation stunned me. Eliza Morgan, the woman who worked 18-hour days and expected her staff to do the same, was a mother? The woman who scheduled meetings during dinner hours and called the office on Christmas Day had a 6-year-old daughter? You're surprised, she noted, a defensive edge creeping into her voice. I just never knew. Few people do. I've kept my personal and professional lives separate for good reason. She straightened in her chair. But if we do this, our lives would need to merge, at least for appearances. You and Ethan would move into my grandmother's estate. We'd present ourselves as a happily married couple raising our children together. And where exactly would I sleep in this arrangement? I asked, the practical question suddenly seeming important. Eliza's expression didn't change, but I could have sworn a faint blush colored her cheeks. The master bedroom has a king-sized bed. We're both adults, James. I'm sure we can manage. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at Boston's skyline glittering in the night. This was madness. Complete madness. And yet. 1 year, I said finally, turning back to face her. And then what? We get a public divorce? How do we explain that to the children? We'll cross that bridge when we come to it, Eliza replied, relief evident in her voice. She clearly thought I was agreeing. I haven't said yes, I reminded her. But you will. She stood up, smoothing her skirt with practiced precision. Because I'm prepared to offer you something better than money. Which is? Partnership. Her eyes gleamed. After this is over, regardless of how it ends, I'll make you a junior partner in the firm. 5% equity. Your financial future, and Ethan's, secured forever. The offer took my breath away. 5% of Morgan Enterprises was worth millions. It was the kind of opportunity that came once in a lifetime, if ever. Think about it, she said, moving toward the door. But not for too long. My grandmother wants to meet my husband this weekend. After she left, I sat in my office for another hour, staring at nothing. I thought about Ethan, about the sadness in his eyes that never quite went away. I thought about my ex-wife and how easily she had walked away from our family. I thought about the mountain of debt I was still climbing out from under after the divorce. And I thought about Eliza Morgan, the ice queen of Boston's business world, who apparently had a 6-year-old daughter and a dying grandmother and a vulnerability I'd never suspected. When I finally drove home to our small apartment, Ethan was already asleep, the babysitter dozing on our couch in front of the television. I paid her, sent her home, and then stood in the doorway of my son's bedroom, watching him sleep. "What do you think, buddy?" I whispered. Should we become part of a pretend family for a while? He didn't answer, of course. But as I watched his small chest rise and fall, I made my decision. The next morning, I called Eliza. "I'll do it," I said when she answered. "But I have conditions." "Name them," she replied without hesitation. "Ethan's happiness comes first. If at any point this arrangement hurts him, we find another way." "Agreed. And I want everything in writing. The partnership, the terms, all of it. My lawyers are already drafting the agreement." I took a deep breath. "One more thing. If we're going to do this, if we're going to pretend to be a family, then we need to actually act like one. That means you can't work 18-hour days. You need to be present, for your daughter and for the charade." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "Eliza?" I prompted. "No one has made demands of me in a very long time, James," she said finally, her voice cool. "It's refreshing. I agree to your terms." And just like that, I agreed to become the fake husband of Eliza Morgan, a woman who had made assistants cry, who had crushed competitors without remorse, and who, I was beginning to suspect, was far more complex than anyone gave her credit for. Little did I know that pretending to be a family would change all of us in ways we could never have anticipated. Chapter 2, Moving Day. "Dad, why are we moving to a mansion?" Ethan asked, his small face serious as he clutched his backpack in the back seat of my car. It was Saturday morning, and we were driving to the Morgan family estate for the first time. The agreement had been signed, the story established. Eliza and I had been secretly dating for a year, had married in a private ceremony 3 months ago, and had been taking time to blend our families before making our relationship public. "It's not exactly a mansion," I hedged, though from the photos Eliza had shown me, it wasn't far off. "And we're moving because Ms. Morgan and I are together now." "Like married?" Ethan's voice was carefully neutral. Since his mother left, he'd become an expert at hiding his feelings. "Yes, like married." The lie tasted bitter. I'd promised myself after the divorce that I would always be honest with my son. "We'll be living with her, her daughter Lily, and her grandmother." "Do I have to call her Mom?" The question was so quiet I almost missed it. I gripped the steering wheel tighter. "No, buddy. You don't have to call her anything you're not comfortable with. You can call her Eliza." He nodded, looking out the window as suburban neighborhoods gave way to increasingly exclusive estates. "Does Lily have a mom and dad?" "Eliza is her mom," I explained, realizing I knew almost nothing about Lily's father. It hadn't come up in our hasty planning sessions. "I don't think her dad is around." "Like my mom isn't around," Ethan said matter-of-factly. My heart clenched. "Your mom loves you very much, Ethan. She just lives in California with Todd," he finished for me. "I know, Dad." We drove in silence for a few minutes, turning onto a private road lined with ancient oak trees. At the end stood a sprawling colonial home, white with black shutters and a circular driveway centered around a fountain. "Whoa," Ethan breathed, pressing his face against the window. "It is a mansion." As we pulled up to the front door, it opened to reveal Eliza, dressed more casually than I'd ever seen her in jeans and a simple blouse. Beside her stood a small girl with dark pigtails and a wary expression. "Remember, buddy," I said as I parked the car, "this is going to be an adjustment for everyone. Let's try to make the best of it, okay?" Ethan nodded solemnly, and we got out of the car. "James," Eliza greeted me with a smile that looked almost natural. "And you must be Ethan. I've heard so much about you." My son, usually shy around strangers, surprised me by stepping forward and extending his hand. "Nice to meet you, Ms. Morgan." "Please, call me Eliza," she said, shaking his hand with appropriate seriousness. "This is my daughter, Lily." The little girl partially hid behind her mother's legs, peering out at us with curious eyes. Do you like Legos? She asked Ethan. My son's expression brightened slightly. Yeah. I have a Star Wars set. I have the Princess Castle, Lily replied. Wanna see? Just like that, the ice was broken. As the children disappeared into the house, Eliza and I were left standing awkwardly in the driveway. Your son has good manners, she observed. Your daughter seems sweet, I returned. We looked at each other, the reality of what we were doing suddenly overwhelming. This wasn't just a business arrangement anymore. We were involving our children in an elaborate lie. Second thoughts? Eliza asked, reading my expression. Several hundred, I admitted. But I'm here. She nodded, understanding in her eyes. My grandmother is resting. You'll meet her at dinner. The staff has been informed of our situation. The staff? I repeated. Just Mrs. Winters the housekeeper, Frank the groundskeeper, and Rosa who helps with cooking and cleaning, Eliza explained. They're all discreet and loyal to my grandmother. They won't question our story. I nodded, trying to process the fact that I would be living in a house with staff. My entire apartment could probably fit in the entrance hall of this place. I'll show you to our room, Eliza said, turning toward the house. The movers brought your things yesterday. I followed her through the imposing front door into a foyer with a sweeping staircase. The house was traditional but not stuffy, with comfortable-looking furniture and family photos lining the walls. It was warmer than I'd expected, given Eliza's cool professional demeanor. Your grandmother has lived here long? I asked as we climbed the stairs. All her life. It was my mother's childhood home, and then mine after my parents died. There was something in her voice I couldn't quite identify. I moved out when I took over the company. It made more sense to have an apartment in the city. And Lily stayed here? Eliza paused on the landing. My grandmother offered to help when Lily was born. I was trying to save the company from my uncle's mismanagement, working impossible hours. It seemed like the best arrangement for everyone. There was defensiveness in her tone, and I realized I'd touched a nerve. I wasn't judging, I said quietly. Single parenting is hard. We all do what we have to. Something in her expression softened. Yes, we do. She continued up the stairs. The master suite is this way. The bedroom was large and elegant, with a sitting area, a massive four-poster bed, and French doors leading to a balcony. 2 doors on opposite walls led to separate walk-in closets, and another to an ensuite bathroom bigger than my entire kitchen at home. Your things are in the left closet, Eliza said, gesturing. The bathroom has dual sinks. I've cleared half the drawers for you. I set down the small overnight bag I'd brought, feeling distinctly out of place among the obvious luxury. This is quite a room. It was my grandparents', Eliza explained. My grandfather passed 10 years ago. My grandmother moved to the downstairs suite after her hip replacement last year. I walked to the window, looking out over manicured gardens and, in the distance, what appeared to be a small lake. Beautiful property. It's been in the family for generations. Eliza moved to stand beside me, close but not touching. James, I know this is strange. But I appreciate what you're doing. I turned to look at her, struck by the sincerity in her voice. At work, Eliza Morgan was all sharp edges and calculated moves. Here, in her family home, she seemed different. More human. So, I said, gesturing to the bed, about the sleeping arrangements. A faint blush colored her cheeks. As I said, we're adults. The bed is certainly big enough to share without encroaching on each.